course, NFL fans and I had to get heartbroken last night on Monday Night Football between the Saints and the Chiefs. NFL fans continue to have to live with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs being 5-0 despite Patrick Mahomes playing like ass. And also the fact that Rashid Shaheed got 21 points in fantasy, well, as far as Yahoo goes, and I lose by 25 points to another 1-3 team, so I'm 1-4. Absolutely devastating. Anyways, welcome back to another Grizzly Talks football episode. We got week 5 NFL reactions this week. We had some stunners, we had some very good games, and we had a bit of a snooze fest, all being talked about tonight. If you haven't already, make sure you press the red subscribe button, hit the like button if you will enjoy this that's coming up, and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one of the episodes. I will leave a playlist in the description so you can feel the entire thing so you're all caught up. Anyways, let's get straight to it. Kicking off this week, we had the Thursday Night Football matchup between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons that went to overtime, with the Falcons getting the W. Kurt Dober is fucking here, fuckers! Obviously, this was an amazing game with Baker Mayfield having 180 yards and 3 touchdowns, while 19 of 24 passing. We had Rashad White having 7.2 yards to carry, 72 yards. Bucky Irvin had 44 rushing yards, and he had a fumble this week, unfortunately for him. And hey, Baker Mayfield had 6 carries for 42 yards, 7 yards to carry. Pretty good, solid game for him. We also had Chris Godwin lead the receiver with 5 catches to 64 yards. Mike Evans being on my fantasy team, one of my bright lights, with 5 catches, 62 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Kate Otten with 3 catches for 44. And the other touchdown being to Sterling Shepard. Dang. And of course, the defense that was depleted with injuries. We had a pick from Levante David. We also had 4 sacks in this game. 2 of it by Logan Hall. Vita Vea even had himself one. And then Tyke Smith, Jamel Dean, and Zion McCollum even had some solid games. And even KJ Brett and Christian Isian. Man, Buccaneers played well. Kirk Cousins easily had his best game of the season, with 42 of 58, 500 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a pick. Damn. Bijan Robinson had 61 yards. Not terrible, but the rushing game was completely irrelevant in this case because the passing game completely took over every single aspect of the game. The leader receiving was Drake London with 12 catches, 154 yards and a touchdown, but Kyle Pitts had 7 catches for 88 yards, finally pleasing the Kyle Pitts fantasy owners, with Darnell Mooney having 9 catches, 100 yards and 2 scores, Kadero Hodge having 2 catches for 67 yards, including the 42-yard game-winning touchdown in overtime. Oh yeah, and by the way, Ray-Ray McCloud was 6 catches for 66 yards because why not? It was literally just an offensive shootout. I mean, Bertrand and Kanan Ellis was in there. Bertrand was obviously replacing Troy Anderson. Well, I guess Troy Anderson was basically the anchor of the defense because, man, they couldn't stop a single person. And also, David Onyemata had the only sack of the game. If Kirk Cousins can keep up this level of play, we're going to be on a long ride to an NFC South title, perhaps. But no disrespect to the Buccaneers, you guys played well, but not well enough. Up next, we had the London game on Sunday morning between the New York Jets and the Minnesota Vikings, with the Vikings coming out on top 23-17. Also, this was like the first bad game that Sam Darnold played. Man, interesting stuff. Oh yeah, and a couple days after the game, Robert Saleh was fired after a 2-3 start to this season. My personal opinion, it was long overdue, Jets. You should have fired this man a long time ago. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers had a very shaky game with 29 of 54, 244 yards, 2 touchdowns, but 3 interceptions. Obviously, the rushing game was absolutely horrid with 2.6 yards to carry for both Braylon Allen and Breece Hall. Breece, you're letting down everybody. Leading the receiving was obviously Garrett Wilson with 13 catches, 100 yards, and a score. Alan Lazard had the other touchdown, and Tyler Conklin even being a reliable tight end with 6 catches for 55 yards. Man, Garrett Wilson really outdid himself and impressed a ton of fantasy owners who had Garrett Wilson on their team. If you had him, great job. You had yourself a ton of points. But seriously, Breece Hall, 2.3 points total in this game. Really? And for the Jets defense, there were 4 sacks in this game, an interception by Brandon Echols. We had Jamian Sherwood, Isaiah Oliver, and Quincy Williams have some solid games, with Oliver even having a sack in this game. Well, McDonald and Clemens had sacks, and so did Leonard Taylor. Man. And, oh yeah, Isaiah Oliver was a former Falcon when you drafted him in, the 3rd round in, 2018? It's nice to see one of our own have a good game elsewhere. And Sam Darnold, like I said, had his first shaky game of the season. 14 of 31, 179 yards, and a pick. Nick Mullins even had a pass. Rushing game for the Jets wasn't that great either. Except CJ Ham had the only touchdown on the ground. Leading the receiving was Justin Jefferson, who had 6 catches for 92 yards. And yeah, no touchdowns on the receiving end. This was just a shaky game all around, but the Vikings still won. Well, offensively, of course. Of course, there were 3 sacks in this game by Harrison Smith, Ivan Pace, and Harrison Phillips, with 3 interceptions. By Stephon Gilmore had one of them, Bynum had another, and there was also one by Andrew Van Ginkel that was returned for a pick 6. What a game for Minnesota's defense. I mean, forcing 3 turnovers, getting 3 sacks, you can't go wrong with this Vikings team. They got a really good defense. Congratulations, Vikings, you're 5-0. It was an ugly game, but you still got it done. Congrats. Kicking off the Sunday afternoon slate, we had the Carolina Panthers absolutely getting gum-smacked by the Chicago Bears on Soldier Field. Obviously, you see one of the videos, there were multiple players ejected after, during the end of the game. It was J.C. Horn and an offensive lineman for the Bears that got ejected. But every week, Caleb Williams is starting to get a lot better this season. Bryce Young had some snaps. I mean, he wasn't terrible, but yeah, when he got thrust in the starting spot, his confidence was down the toilet. Andy Dalton had a very shaky game with 18 of 28, 136, and a pick. It's nice to know that you can rely on Chuba Hubbard every now and then with 97 yards and a scoring touchdown. And receiving for Carolina was led by Jalen Coker. What? 4 catches, 68 yards. That's new. And defensively, surprisingly, there was only 1 sack by Charles Harris, but then Trevin Wallace and J.C. Horn had some solid games. Same with Xavier Woods. No, that's not Trevon Walker, that's Trevin Wallace of the Carolina Panthers. Obviously, as I said before, Caleb Williams is looking a lot better as each week goes by. 20 of 29, 300 yards and 2 touchdowns for the man. Jeez. DeAndre Swift had 73 yards and a touchdown. He should have had 2 or 3 touchdowns if he didn't get stopped at the 1-yard line twice. Rashawn Johnson had 2 touchdowns on the ground as well. And receiving was led by DJ Moore, who had 5 catches, 100 yards, and 2 touchdowns. All you DJ Moore fantasy owners, are you complaining now? You better not be, because man, he had a hell of a game. And the Bears defense had 4 sacks in this game. Kevin Byard had the only interception. There was Gervin Dexter who had a sack. Austin Booker, Andrew Billings, and then a couple other guys, Kyler Gorton and DeMarcus Walker, who combined for a sack. And let's go down to the kicking. Kira Santos did what he needed to, hit the only field goal that he needed to do. He got 6 points. Man, Bears were dominant in this game. I know it's against the Panthers, but Bears look good. You're on the upside, Chicago. Keep it going for Caleb Williams' sake. Up next, we had the Cleveland Browns getting absolutely gum-smacked by the Washington Commanders. I got one thing to say. Browns are ass! Obviously, Jameis Winston threw a pass and he had a 16-yard completion, but then Deshaun Watson, 125 yards and a touchdown on 15 of 28 passing is not going to get it done. Rushing was led by Jerome Ford and Dante Foreman, combining for 18 carries, 91 yards, 5 yards a carry. That was the only thing going for them on offense. Even Amari Cooper led the team in receiving with 4 catches for 60 yards, and the only touchdown was by their tight end Jordan Akins, who had 3 catches, 22 yards, and a score for the injured David Njoku. The Browns had 3 sacks on defense, including one by Owusu Koramoah, who also had an interception. Devin Bush had a solid game tackling. There was also one by Za'Darius Smith that looked very nice. I believe that was a strip sack? I'm not too sure. Defense continues to play well, but the offensive struggles are still continuing for the Browns. As for Washington, Jayden Daniels had 238 yards, a touchdown, a pick of 14-25. Man. And he even led the team in rushing with 82 yards on 11 carries. Eckler had 6 carries for 67 yards. Brian Robinson had 2 touchdowns, and Mick Nichols even had a touchdown on the ground. Damn. Oh, Marcus Mariota ran twice? That's a little interesting. Receiving was obviously led by Terry McLaurin, who had 4 catches, 112 yards. Jeez, and then De'Ami Brown had a touchdown of his own on 2 catches for 57 yards, because why not? And let me say this, Washington's defense had 7 sacks in this game. Yeah, you heard that right, 7 sacks. Frankie Luvu had 2.5, Jonathan Allen had a sack, Dorrance Armstrong had a sack, Bobby Wagner had 1.5, Dante Fowler even had 1. Man, this was just an absolute nightmare for Deshaun Watson. It's not just him that's the problem, it's everything else, including Deshaun Watson, that is very wrong for the Browns. If Jayden Daniels continues to be a true NFL quarterback playing like this, yeah, he could be Offensive Rookie of the Year, and Washington could have a very successful season. But Washington, keep this from me, don't turn it into RG3. Don't force him out there to break his leg in a wild card game. Please don't. Up next, we had the Miami Dolphins take on the New England Patriots and win on the road 15-10. Dear God, why me? Like, nothing good happened in this game. Tyler Huntley had 200 yards, 18-31, and a pick. Raheem Mostert and Jalen Wright coming out of nowhere to lead the team in rushing with 86 and 80 yards respectively, and the only touchdown was by their fullback Ingold. Tyreek Hill is starting to get a lot more receptions with 6 catches for 69 yards. Jalen Waddle's starting to get more involved in the offense, but it's still also being run by Jonnu Smith as well with 5 catches, 62. Can't really talk about the defense except Marcus May, Jordan Brooks had solid games, and there were 2 sacks in this game by Zach Sealer and Emmanuel Ogbah. And as for the Pats, Jacoby Brissett had 160 yards of 18-34. Montre Stevenson had a rushing touchdown at 89 yards. Antonio Gibson 52 yards. Like, the rushing game was there. But man, the passing game was hot ass. I mean, Demario Douglas was their best receiver for 6 catches at 59 yards. Not much to really get from this game except Christian Gonzalez had an interception. There was also 3 sacks in this game. Josh Uche had a sack. Jacqueline Roy somehow had a sack. And yeah, this was just a very unwatchable game. As one would say, this is a good old-fashioned tank bowl. Up next, we have the Indianapolis Colts losing an absolute heartbreaker to the Jacksonville Jaguars, giving the Jags their first win of the season. And my God, this game was insane. Joe Flacco put up another masterclass with 33 of 44 for 359 and 3 touchdowns. They wasted this performance. The defense decided to fall asleep and fall flat on the back to play dead. Rushing game was hot ass except for Trey Sermon's touchdown. Yeah, nobody really talks about that. And the receiving was led by Alec Pierce, who had 3 catches, 134 yards. Josh Downs had 9 catches for 69 yards. Alec Pierce had a touchdown. And there was also touchdowns by Michael Pittman and Mo Cox. The usual suspects, E.J. Speed, Zaire Franklin, Nick Cross. Cross had a pick, and E.J. Speed had a very solid game. No sacks in this game for the Colts defense. Zaire Franklin had a good game. Lyotu Latu and Jalen Jones even had a good game. But again, the defense decided to fall flat on their face and die because of, I don't know what reason, but they just ruined Joe Flacco's amazing game again. Trevor Lawrence was actually pretty solid in this game. 28-34 for 371, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. And let me just say, Tank Bigsby is outgaining Travis Etienne in this rushing yards thing. 100 yards of 13 carries at 2 touchdowns is absolutely unreal. Receiving was led out by Brian Thomas, who had 5 catches, 122 yards and a score. Christian Kirk had 4 catches for 88 yards, and the other touchdown was by Brenton Strange, who had 4 catches, 24 yards and a score. And let me just say, Trayvon Walker has arrived. 3 sacks in this game. Antonio Johnson, Ventura Miller, and Andre Cisco had solid games. Josh Hines-Allen had the other sack. Great win, Jacksonville. Maybe you're not as bad as people thought you guys were. Next up, we have the Bills losing to the Texans on a game-winning field goal, 20-23. Buffalo, Coach McDermott, what the hell were you guys doing in that 4th quarter? You had a whole overtime to get to, and you decided to throw the ball deep, 3 times? 3. Josh Allen had one of his worst performances in his career. 9 completions, 30 attempts, 131 yards, and a score. James Cook, cooked up, no pun intended, 20 carries, 82 yards, and a score. Josh Allen did well rushing, but yeah, passing game, not so much. The only bright thing was a 49-yard touchdown reception by Keon Coleman on the receiving end. And as for defense, Dorian Williams continues to be an elite tackler. DeMar Hamlin and Cam Lewis did well tackling. Terrell Bernard had himself an interception. Dwayne Smoot had himself a sack. Man, the fact that I mentioned Dorian Williams almost every week is just crazy because Dorian Williams is a very good tackler. CJ Stroud had himself a game with 28-38, 331 yards, a touchdown and a pick. Cam Akers had the only rushing touchdown with 4.7 yards a carry. Not too shabby. Nico Collins did get hurt in this game. He did have a long touchdown grab. He had 2 catches for 78 yards to end the game. Stephon Diggs led the team in receiving with 6 catches, 82 yards. And even Dario Ogunbowale, third string running back, had 6 catches for 57. Only 1 sack for each team, but Azeez Shire, Derek Stingley had some solid games, and Khalil Davis was the one who had the sack on Josh Allen. Houston, you earned this victory, and you guys are still elite. Well, not really earned, like Buffalo just gifted it to you, but you're still 4-1. Take the win and just move on. Up next, we had easily the game of the week, the battle between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals that took overtime to decide a winner. Let me just say the Bengals are the best 1-4 team in the league, hands down. By the way, both of these quarterbacks combined for 750 yards and 9 touchdowns in this game. Both Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. Crazy QB battle. Obviously, Lamar had 26 of 42 for 348 yards and 4 touchdowns, cementing himself as an MVP candidate. I think the only difference in this game is that Baltimore has a rushing game, like a very good rushing game, but Bengals didn't necessarily have that. With Derrick Henry having 92 yards and a score, Lamar Jackson having 4.6 yards a carry. Crazy stuff in Baltimore. Let me just say, best rushing offense in the league. Can't really stop it too much. Zay Flowers was obviously the leading receiver with 7 catches and 111 yards on the day. Touchdowns were by Charlie Collar, Rashad Bateman, and 2 for Isaiah Likely. Man, he absolutely murdered me. No, not that, but he made my life hell. There was only 3 sacks in this game for the Baltimore's defense, including one from Kyle Hamilton. Nnamdi Madubuike had one, and Tavius Robinson had a sack as well. Marlon Humphrey had the pick, and great games from Roquan Smith and Brandon Stephens on the defense. Or Brendan Stephens, however you want to say it. Joe Burrow had himself a masterclass as well. 30 of 39, 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, only 1 pick. Obviously, Cincinnati's rushing game was shut down. Best rushing defense Baltimore had. They had the best rushing offense and defense coming into this game. Crazy stuff. But let me just say, Ravens can't stop the passing game for shit. I mean, Jamar Chase had 10 catches, 200 yards, and 2 touchdowns. T. Higgins had 9 catches, 83 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And Chase Brown had himself a receiving touchdown in this game. Special shout out to Sam Hubbard, leading the defense with a sack. And yeah, this was just an absolute offensive barrage of points. Baltimore's back up to 500 with a 3-game win streak over the past 3 weeks. And Cincinnati, don't worry, you guys have plenty of chances to get back up to 500. Plenty of them. There's still a lot of football to be played. Because Bengals, you are an elite team despite your record. Up next, we had the Las Vegas Raiders losing to the Denver Broncos 34-18. Man, what happened to Denver this game? And this is also the beginning of the 4 o'clock slate of Sunday. Obviously, Minshew got benched, but both quarterbacks combined for 200 yards, 1 touchdown, and 3 interceptions in this game. Absolutely horrid. We saw Amir Abdullah come out of nowhere to get himself 8.5 yards a carry and a rushing touchdown. Oh man, what? In 2024, you have Amir Abdullah scoring a touchdown? What is this? Receiving was led by Brock Bowers, who had 8 catches, 100 yards, and a score. Jacoby Myers, who I had on the bench of Fantasy, had 6 catches for 72 yards. I could have literally put any of the players who are playing this week over Courtland Sutton. I will talk about Courtland Sutton a little bit from a minute or so. Yeah, no, more like 40 seconds. Only 3 sacks in this game, and it's by the usual suspects. Christian Wilkins with 1, and Max Crosby having 2. But Robert Spillane still had a solid game, and so did Trayvon Mulrig. Bo Nix had himself a very accurate game for the most part, 19 of 27, 206 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Let me just say, Javonte Williams led the team in receiving and rushing with 61 rushing yards and 5 catches for 50 yards. As I was saying before, Cortland Sutton had 2 catches for 32 yards, no touchdowns. Again, I could have started any of my bench players over Sutton, and I would have probably won this week in fantasy football. The only touchdown passes in the game went to Josh Reynolds and Jaleel McLaughlin. And the Denver defense, again, wreaking some havoc in this game. Zach Gallen had a sack, Cooper had a sack, and Bonito had a sack. 3 interceptions, one by Riley Moss. Man, he is a white cornerback who is getting an absolute handful this week. And Pat Surtain having 2 interceptions. One of them was returned for a touchdown. Absolutely well done, Denver. I tried to tell everybody that you cannot sleep on Bo Nix. Like, he's going to be a good quarterback if you give him some time. And that altercation with Sean Payton, it was nothing. It was just more of like trying to get him fired up, trying to light a spark on his ass. Up next, we had the Arizona Cardinals stunning the San Francisco 49ers 24-23. Niners, what happened? Kyler Murray had a very solid game, 19 of 30, 200 yards, a touchdown, a pick, and he even had a 50-yard rushing touchdown to start the game. Obviously, James Conner was effective in the rushing game. Elijah Higgins had the only touchdown, with receiving being led by Michael Wilson and Trey McBride. And Marvin Harrison was very disappointing, only logging 2 catches for 36 yards. And defensively, there were 2 sacks and 2 picks in this game. Kaiser White had, I believe he had the game-winning interception to win it. Mac Wilson had another pick. There was Naquan Jones and Chris Barnes who had sacks. And Budda Baker had himself a game as well. A very shaky game for Brock Purdy with 19 of 35, 250 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. Dang. Jordan Mason had another solid game with 6.4 yards a carry. Man, 89 yards? Christian McCaffrey fantasy owners are in shambles right now. Receiving was led by Brandon Ayuk. This is why you paid the man. 8 catches and 147 yards, with George Kittle having 8 catches, 64 yards, and the only receiving touchdown. Much different story for 49ers. Fred Warner had himself a game, but there was only 1 sack by Leonard Floyd and a Nick Bosa interception. I thought for sure Niners were Super Bowl contenders, but man, this game broke every single 49ers fan's hearts. Arizona, man, what a stunner. Dude, this is why you don't sleep on the Cardinals. Up next, we have the New York Giants stunning the Seattle Seahawks 29-20. What? I don't even know what to say, Seattle. If you won this game, you'd be ahead of second by 2 games. But you blew it. NFC West really might be up for grabs. And this is why Daniel Jones gets paid the big bucks. 23 of 34, 250 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Crazy stuff. Even crazier was Tyrone Tracy Jr. Being in the reserve for Devin Singletary. 18 carries, 129 yards. Man. Receiving was led by Darius Slayton with 8 catches, 122 yards, and a touchdown. And then Wan'Dale Robinson even had himself a score. Oh, did I forget to mention that Daniel Jones didn't have Malik Neighbors to play and he still balled out? But dear God, there were 7 sacks in this game. 3 of them went to Dexter Lawrence. 2 of them went to DJ Davidson. There was 1 by Brian Burns, and there was also Raheem Nunez-Roches and Kayvon Thibodeau, who combined for 1. Geno Smith had a decent game with 28 of 40, 280 yards, and a touchdown. Their leading rusher was Geno Smith because Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet couldn't get a yard on the ground to save their lives. This part of the game on offense was that Geno was trying to play hero ball, and he couldn't do everything. Receiving was led by Tyler Lockett, who had 4 catches for 75 yards, and the only touchdown in the game was by Jackson Smith and Jigba. And oh yeah, Jake Bobo had a reception. Hooray! Seahawks had 3 sacks in this game from Jerome Baker, Derek Hall, and Tyrell Dodson, with Julian Love, Trey Brown, and Dever Witherspoon having solid games tackling the ball here as well. Talk your shit, New York. Man, you dominated this game defensively. And Daniel Jones did his job and to make sure you guys had the win. In the final game of the Sunday 4 o'clock slate, we had the Green Bay Packers beating the Rams 24-19. This game should not have been close. Jordan Love had himself a solid game with 15-26, 220 yards, 2 touchdowns in a pick. Josh Jacobs had himself 73 yards and a score. I mean, he was pretty effective in the rushing game. Receiving was led by Tucker Kraft, who had 4 catches, 88 yards, and 2 scores, but Jaden Reed also had 4 catches for 78, being a solid receiver. Nothing unusual, Xavier McKinney had his weekly interception. We had Carl Brooks and Edgerrin Cooper have sacks. In fact, there were 3 sacks in this game for the Packers defense. And Quay Walker even had himself a decent game, same with Evan Williams, and even Isaiah McDuffie. And as for the Rams, Matt Stafford had himself an okay game, 29-45, 260 yards, touchdown and a pick. Kyron Williams had his weekly touchdown, 8 straight games with a touchdown. Oh yeah, and he also had 102 yards. Receiving was led by Jordan Whittington. What the fuck, man? Toby Parkinson at 7 for 52, Tutu Atwell 6 for 58. The only touchdown was by Demarcus Robinson. As for the Rams defense, 2 players to really give a shout out to. Kobe Turner with 2 sacks and then Jalen McCullough with a pick. Man, this game was crazy. Crazy close, and it should not have been. Man, Green Bay, you had to survive LA. Their only win was against the Niners. Come on, Packers. They had no real receiver to throw to except for Demarcus Robinson, Tutu, and Whittington. Rams, you could be competitive in some of these games. Let's not sleep on you guys. The Sunday night matchup was between the Dallas Cowboys, who got the victory, and a last-second touchdown over the Pittsburgh Steelers 20-17. This game legit ended at 1 a.m. Eastern Time. Come on, man. And of course, there was thunder and rain in the Pittsburgh area that delayed the game until 9:15 or something? But it actually turned out to be a solid game. Of course, Dak Prescott had some mental mistakes, 29-42, 352 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he also threw 2 interceptions. Rico Dowdle was their main rusher with 20 carries and 87 yards. The only 2 touchdowns in the game were by Rico Dowdle and the man who led the receiving, who had the game-winning touchdown for Dallas, Jalen Tolbert, with 7 catches, 87 yards and a score. Don't forget, Kavontae Turpin had 4 catches for 50 yards, CD had 5 catches, 62 yards, and Ferguson had 6 catches for 70 yards. I told y'all Jake was good, you just needed to give him some time to heal up. CD had a mid-game, but not good enough, at least for my standards. There were only 3 sacks in this game. Linville Joseph had a sack. There was also 4 players who combined for sacks. Man, Dallas had a pretty solid game getting to Justin Fields at quite a bunch of time. And also nice games from DeMarvion Overshone and Eric Kendricks. I mean, Justin Fields was solid as well. 15-27, 131 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. I had him in fantasy and I felt like he could have done a lot more, especially with the rushing game being non-existent. Najee had 42 rushing yards on 3 yards to carry, really? And the leading receiver was Najee with 2 catches, 35 yards. The only 2 touchdowns were by tight ends, Connor Hayward and Pat Freiermuth. And also one of them was a shovel pass. Congratulations, Cowboys, you got shoveled. Obviously, defensively, TJ Watt is an absolute animal defensively. Good games from Minka Fitzpatrick, Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson, and Deshaun Elliott. There was also interceptions by Dante Jackson and Joey Porter. I will say, both of these teams are very solid teams. Well, the Cowboys really got the win this game. Good job, Dallas. Both of these teams have bright futures, I will say that. Pittsburgh, keep your head up, and you're going to get that win next week. Hopefully. And finally, to end this episode, we have the Monday Nighter between the New Orleans Saints losing to the Kansas City Chiefs 26-13. Not including preseason games, this is 11 straight wins as regular season and playoffs for Kansas City. Can this fucking reign of terror end already, please? I mean, Kansas City is 2-0 against NFC South teams. Can stop that. Can I also address something? Where the hell is Derek Carr? I mean, he had to leave the game because of an injury. 18-28, 165 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. He was still mid. He put in a solid performance, but then the rushing game. What happened here? Kamara, 26 rushing yards. Really? Receiving was led by, oh dear God, Rashid Shaheed with 4 catches, 86 yards and a score. Shaheed even had a 50-yard touchdown. Foster Moreau even had the other one. Besides the 2 sacks from Brian Brees and Chase Young, the only main other component of this defense was the big boy interception, baby! Kalen Saunders, man. Mahomes had another stinker. I mean, he had 300 yards, 20 of 39, but he also had no touchdowns and a pick. Kareem Hunt brought back from the dead to get 100 yards and a touchdown in 2024. Are you serious? Oh yeah, and Xavier Worthy even had a rushing touchdown, because why not? And receiving was led by Juju Smith-Schuster with 7 catches, 130 yards. Travis Kelce with 9 catches and 70 yards. Juju Smith-Schuster having an elite game performance in 2024. Yeah, that's not what I had on my bingo chart. Chiefs defense was able to stop the run efficiently, but only 1 sack in the passing game. And Brian Cook had the only interception. Crazy stuff, but Nick Bolton and Jalen Watson had some solid games as well. Like I said before, that is 11 straight wins, not including preseason games, between regular season and postseason, that the Chiefs have won. They can't keep getting away with this! And that is going to do it for this episode of Grizzly Talks Football. If you enjoyed this episode, give this video a like, hit the red subscribe button, and be sure to check out the notification bell and click on that as well so you don't miss a single video I post. Anyways, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next episode. Peace!